nothing turns out.
General Sauer, can I ask you a question that's also related to the stay factors? Justice Sotomayor brought up the public interest here, and we have amicus briefs from economists who tell us that if Governor Cook if we grant you your stay, that it could trigger a recession. How should we think about the public interest in a case like this?
Yeah, two things to say about that. One is, if you look at what actually happened here, she was removed on August 25th, and the stock market went up for the next 3 days. So we've already had a kind of natural experiment, so to speak, about whether or not the predictions of doom will really be implemented. And surely that if investors are jittery or whatever the argument is, you would have seen that on August 25th, and you did not see that. In fact, you have these surprised.
Well, I'll interrupt you there to say that I don't want to be in the business of predicting exactly what the market's going to do.
I agree, and that's why I think the court ought to consider all those amicus briefs and their sort of, predictions of doom with a fairly jaundiced eye. What the court has to do is weigh, essentially you have in those amicus briefs a reflection of very elite opinion that
but there's a risk, General Sauer.
Yes.
I don't want to be responsible for quantifying that risk. I'm a judge, not an economist. But if there is a risk, doesn't that counsel in the stay posture when the equities are at stake caution on our part?
I think the court has to weigh that risk against the risk that there will be a permanent damage to the Federal Reserve's credibility from allowing an officer, a governor, to remain in office who's engaged in this kind of behavior before she gains office.
Well, do we also engage in some weighing of our own about how serious we think the misbehavior was in the stay posture? And I'm not talking about once the case was here on the merits, but if she were accused of murder or something like that, if we're talking about something that was really an infamous crime, should we take the nature of the crime into account in the stay posture in the weighing of the equities?
I think what the court ought to take into account is the close nexus between the conduct at issue here and the duties of this incredibly powerful position that has sweeping, powerful authority over the entire United States economy. The governor set interest rates for ordinary Americans all across the country. And here, there's the appearance of having played fast and loose, or at least been grossly negligent in getting favorable interest rates for herself.
So it's appropriate.
What's the message to ordinary Americans that comes out of that is the question for the court. And how do you weigh that against the elite opinion that's reflected in the amicus briefs? Obviously, President Trump's voice speaks to that concern of ordinary Americans. I think with the balance of the equities, what the court ought to do is look at the merits, which are extremely strong for us, and then look at its traditional and can stay factors. The court says, when the government is a party, the irreparable harm to the government merges with the public interest. And here we have traditional irreparable harms, injuries to the president's ability to remove a principal officer of the United States. When you look at, for example, the original evidence we've talked about in the decisions of 1789, when everybody said, or both camps were saying, of course the president can engage in suspensory removals, and we have a preliminary injunction that is conspicuously non-existent, in your words, in CASA, for 225 years of American history.